Yo, you guys, this is Blacklisted the Abyss, and you are watching my review, my spoiler-free review for the new Ghost in the Shell movie starring Scarlett Johansson. Okay? This movie is about the Major. She is in an accident and essentially dies, but scientists are able to save her brain and implant it into an artificial body, making her one of the very first legitimate artificial humans, but not with the brain of an AI, with an actual human brain. Okay, um, and this is, as far as a science fiction story goes, it sounds incredibly interesting, and I have mixed thoughts about it. The positives are that the visuals are incredible. They're absolutely stunning. Okay, the effects are incredibly well done. I have no idea how they did it, but I know they did a fabulous job with it because this movie is incredibly beautiful. It's you watch it and you're just amazed at how they were able to just do all. I can't even really put it into words. The visuals are stunning. Okay, personally, I saw the movie in 3D, and the 3D was actually utilized at different parts of the movie. You usually don't see 3D utilized as well as it could be, but this movie actually took advantage of it in parts and pieces. So that was good to see as well. Um, Now, this next positive point isn't going to be relevant to a lot of people. For those who don't know, this Ghost in the Shell movie is adapted from uh, a couple different sources: a graphic novel from Japan, a manga, also an animated film from 1995, as well as an anime series called Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Okay, and as someone who has seen the source material, for me personally, I like the fact that they actually paid homage to that source material. There are scenes in this movie that are taken specifically out of the animated movie from '95. It's literally like they took it shot for shot straight out of the movie, and that is actually a positive in my book. I am a fanboy for when people pay homage to the source material they're adapting something from, and for me, this is one of the highlights of the movie, especially when it's mixed with those incredible visuals. Okay, so all of that, along with the concept in general, just implanting human brains into artificial bodies to create these ultimate weapons, those are the positives of this Ghost in the Shell movie. Now, there are negatives as well. Seeing as how I am familiar with the source material, this first negative is not going to affect people who are not familiar with the source material. You all will find this completely, it's just not going to be a problem for you. But for people who are familiar with the source material, they will be disappointed by the fact that Togusa, one of the main characters in the franchise, is completely marginalized and irrelevant. He has, that I can remember, 2 scenes in the entire movie, none of which mean anything at all. Maybe he had one extra scene and I just forgot about it, but the fact that I did forget about it is proof of something in and of itself. Okay? And the reason why this is so disappointing and why I have it listed as a legitimate negative on the movie is because Togusa is literally the single most human character on this team. Okay? Him, Bato, the Major, Aramaki, this entire team called Section 9 who solve cases. Alright. Most of them are cybernetically enhanced in some way, shape, or form, and Togusa is the single most human person there with the single least amount of enhancements. Okay, and the reason why he's so important, the Major herself actually says in the animated movie, she says a system where all the parts react the same is a system with a fatal flaw. Essentially, if Togusa is not on this team, the team is doomed to fail. That's how important he is to this team, yet the movie makes him completely irrelevant and essentially poisons the team to make it a giant failure. Of course, because it's a movie, they don't actually have it lead to that failure because it's not how stories work most of the time. Alright, but the fact that such an important member of the team is essentially written out is disappointing for people who are actually familiar with the source material and are looking forward to characters like Togusa, being adapted in this type of medium. Okay. Now, for people who the rest of my negatives actually do affect people who aren't familiar with the source material at all. Okay. The first being that the pacing is incredibly slow, slower than it needs to be. Okay, and that leads to the story, the overarching story, being pretty boring. Okay, like an hour into the movie, I was looking at my watch trying to figure out how much time was left in the movie. Okay, the story, it's just not that interesting. And that holds true for all instances of Ghost in the Shell, all parts of the franchise, whether it be the graphic novel or the animated film, the TV series, like that holds true for all of it. The story is usually focused around one case specifically, and the team trying to solve that case. Usually the story is not the selling point of the franchise, so it's character based. So you can maybe look past the boring story, maybe look past the slow pacing, because the story itself is supposed to be character based. It's the characters that make you like it. The problem is that in this adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, the characters are not captivating in any way. They aren't fleshed out at all. It's not just Togusa, it's pretty much all of them. Okay, Aramaki is literally just a guy. Bato is just a guy. Bato is decent. He's probably the second best character in the movie behind the Major, but he's not enough to carry the movie on his own. He's not really fleshed out. He's just has more screen time than most other people, really. Okay. And maybe you can look past all of that too and say, yes, the story is boring, the pacing is slow, the characters aren't fleshed out. But the Major, she's the one who's truly focused on. She's the main character, and the story revolves around her. Now, you don't realize the degree to which the story revolves around her until much later in the movie, and I won't get into spoilers or anything, right? But the point is, she's the main character, the story revolves around her, and she's the one getting all the focus, all the backstory, all the development. So, because of all of that, it should be fine. We should be able to look past all the other things. But the problem is that Scarlett Johansson's performance doesn't really capture the Major well at all, so you can't really get invested in her as well as you should. Okay, her acting just was not what it needed to be for an artificial but still kind of human being. Okay, the subtleties were not there. The acting was just not as strong as it needed to be to play a character this complex. Okay, and because of that, it kind of takes you out of the complexities of the character and makes her look simpler than she actually is, which hurts her development a lot. Okay, and maybe I'm biased because I personally have seen both seasons of the show Humans on AMC, which also has people playing artificial humans, some of which are conscious and some of which are not, some of which go back and forth between being conscious and not being conscious. Okay, the acting in that show is phenomenal, and maybe that's why I don't think Scarlett Johansson's performance was good, is because I'm inherently comparing her to them, and maybe that's not fair, but as someone who has seen how these specific roles can be acted out, just how well they can be done, her performance just does not cut it in my eyes. And maybe that's just me. Maybe someone else can go see this movie and think, yes, Scarlett Johansson's performance is perfect. It's not nearly as awkward as this guy thinks it is. All right, but in my eyes, it just doesn't cut it. So when you look at the fact that the Major is the only character to get actual development and actual focus, but is not acted well enough for you to care. No other characters are really that relevant at all. The story is boring, so you can't fall back on that, and the pacing is slow to add into all of it. All you really have left are the fight scenes, and the fight scenes that are there are good. The problem is that the movie doesn't actually focus on the action. It's not nearly as prevalent as you would think it was from watching the trailers. Okay, it's just not. Alright, so the movie really only has its visuals. That's That's all it has. It and its concept, the visuals and the concept. Okay, but a concept alone cannot carry a story. The story actually has to step up. The characters have to step up. The action, if there is action in it, has to step up. And it just doesn't happen. Okay, it just doesn't. Okay, so Ghost in the Shell for me is a 6.5 out of 10. It's that kind of movie. Okay, and if you want to see and see those, I might even go so far as to say revolutionary visuals, because they truly are incredible, then by all means go and see it, because they are truly incredible, incredibly well done. Okay, but that alone, if that's not why you want to see the movie, if you want to see it for the story and the characters, it's just not there. Okay, so I will give Ghost in the Shell a 6.5 out of 10. Now, with that said, there is one more negative that I had for this movie. And this is, I can't really get into what really irks me without spoiling something, so this is going to be the one spoiler that I give, and it has to do with the whole whitewashing casting controversy of Ghost in the Shell, where the major, her name is Motoko Kusanagi. She's supposed to be Japanese, but they cast Scarlett Johansson as her instead. Okay. The reason why, and granted, they did better than I thought they would. Aramaki speaks Japanese throughout the entire movie. I don't think he speaks a word of English throughout. There are Asian characters in there, one of which is Tokusa, but like I said, he's irrelevant, so he probably doesn't really count that much. But there are actual Asian characters in this movie. But the problem is that they didn't... The one Asian role that truly mattered, which was the major, they did not trust an Asian to carry that role, and had to cast Scarlett Johansson instead. And you can argue, okay, all right, well, it's not that big of a deal. They did try to get that Asian representation in there. They did try to... There's actually a point in the movie, an incredibly clever part of the story. One of the like once you I mentioned before that later in the movie you realize the story revolves around her more than you realize. It's that's the one clever part of the story. Okay, there's this initial part and the boring part. Eventually, at the end, the story gets interesting because you start learning more about the major. And it's very clever what they did. But the problem is that there's a specific scene where they actually did cast a Japanese woman to play Motoko Kusanagi. And I won't get into the details just to avoid complete and total spoilers. I mean, you can probably, based on what I've said throughout this review, you can probably put 2 and 2 together. But still, there is a point in this movie where you can tell they have casted a Japanese woman to play Motoko Kusanagi. And the part that gets to me is that they went through the effort of finding a Japanese woman to play the major just to say, no, we're giving the role to Scarlett Johansson instead. So that kind of gets to me. The entire reason why the whitewashing controversy existed is because they didn't want to make a Japanese character Japanese, but then you see in the movie they did actually make her Japanese, but they still changed her to being white anyway. So that kind of annoys me. But again, I will acknowledge that the way they did it was clever and does benefit the story in the end. I mean, at that point, it's kind of too little too late. It's still a boring story for the most of the movie. Still not enough development. Still acting just not that good in the with respect to the major. But still, that end point was very clever. So I'll give it that. That's the 0.5 in my 6.5. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Um, but like I said, my rating for Ghost in the Shell is a 6.5 out of 10, and that's that, you guys. Rate, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at BlacklistOTA, where I discuss everything from anime to manga to geek culture in general to wrestling to even a couple funny memes I see, politics, whatever, blah blah blah. Okay, follow me on Twitter at BlacklistOTA, rate, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.